Welcome to Chapter 4. This chapter, we're going to discuss global management and how we go about managing across borders, internationally. Understanding that the world is smaller and smaller because we now have greater reach with less effort. With the advancement of technology and our ability to establish locations and plants in multiple places and not just in our local home country, we have to learn how to manage our organization properly internationally. So you should be able to answer these questions by the end of the chapter. The three important developments of globalization that will probably affect you the most, why you should learn about international management and the various characteristics that a successful international management manager possesses, why companies expand internationally and how do they go about doing it, and what are some of the barriers to free trade, and what major organizations and trading blocs promote that trade, and what are the principal areas of cultural differences. So when we look at globalization, and we have to always look at competition and who's going to be number one tomorrow. You may be number one today, but who's on your back to take your place for tomorrow? And so we have to always look at the trend in the economy worldwide and how that trend is becoming more of an interdependent system, meaning it can stand on its own while also it needs to lean on other economies. So we have to always remember that we're a global village. As I said, the world's getting smaller because why? We have technology. We're able to get to places faster with less time that we waste, and we have and it makes it easier for us to communicate with each other. We don't necessarily need to travel somewhere. We can do an e-conference call using Skype or FaceTime, Google Voice, other web conferencing tools and platforms. My team, we use video conferencing to engage with each other as well, so we don't necessarily have to all be in the same room. So we look at electronic commerce, which is e-commerce, and that's how we buy and sell products and services through computer networks. You can think about Amazon.com. You can think about so many other retailers that you buy various products from, but also you can purchase various services. You can purchase consulting services through electronic commerce. And in 2013, the sales for e-commerce were estimated at $263.3 billion, which was up by 16.9% from 2012. That's huge. So we look at how other economies are, whether they're stable or unstable, and how well we work and interact with each other as one big global market instead of numerous national markets. And that's what the global economy is. That's where we're really evolving to, where we're then one big global market and not just a cluster here and there of numerous ones. And it is the synergy that is involved in building that global market. There are both positive and negative effects, right? A positive effect is that we end up having more affordable products, better communication amongst nations. A negative is that you end up having more outsourcing. Various jobs that used to be well-paying jobs are now sent overseas because the company can have cheaper labor costs, especially when you talk about manufacturing jobs. So that can have a negative impact on your local economy because jobs are being taken away. We are seeing where many firms are operating worldwide, and this is where small companies can actually get started easily and maneuver faster, right? So we're seeing this insurgence. So here you see the website on Etsy store, and Jolene is selling her art, and she starts getting questions from different countries about her art and the sale of her art. Is she engaged in e-commerce, global trading, counter trading, or embargo? If you said A, e-commerce, you're correct. We'll go back to this, right? You're buying and selling products and services through your computer network, e-commerce. Now, we have different types of organizations and that are geared towards international business. We have our multinational corporation, and that's where you operate in several countries. So you can be in your home country and you also operate in other countries as well. Multinational organization is a nonprofit organization with operations in several countries. So you have a multinational corporation and a multinational organization. The multinational corporation is for profit. The multinational organization is nonprofit. So why do you need to know about this? Well, it's simple. You may deal with foreign customers, clients, or partners. You may have to deal with foreign employees or suppliers. You may one day work for a foreign firm, right? You may work for a company that their headquarters is in another country. Don't say no, I won't, because if any of you work for Toyota or Honda, Porsche, the list can go on and on. Those are foreign firms that have locations in the U.S. So this is a huge learning curve. You may also work for an American firm, right, outside of the U.S. Or you may work for a foreign firm outside the U.S. You may actually relocate to another country and work for a company that is either a U.S. Company, or it could be a foreign company in that foreign country, or a foreign company that's in another foreign country, right? You can live in Japan and work for a company that's from London, right? So it can happen. So this is what successful international managers, these are the things, the qualities, the characteristics, the traits that they have. They're ethnocentric. They believe that their native country, the culture and the language and the behavior are superior to all others. Right? There is parochialism, which is a very narrow view where you see people solely through your own perspective. Those are not characteristics of successful international managers. Right? If you have a belief that the United States and its culture and the English language and how we talk and treat each other are superior to all other countries, you're not going to be successful as an international manager. If you only see people and see things through your own perspective, but you refuse to look through the lens of others, you're not going to be a successful international or domestic manager. You're just not going to be a great manager at all. So these two are red flags. If you're polycentric, that means you take the views that native managers in the foreign offices best understand about native personnel and practices, and so the home office should leave them alone, right? You decide to not bring in the practices and understanding in your home country and try to push them on to those in the new country. Instead, what you do is look at the culture and perspectives and the understandings and the comprehension of those in the other country, the foreign country, and you then implement those. So that's a polycentric viewpoint. Geocentric is where you accept that there's differences as well as similarities between both the home personnel and the foreign personnel, meaning those that are in the home country and those that are in or from the foreign country. And you accept those differences and similarities amongst the practices, and that you should use whatever techniques are most effective in order to reach the goals and objectives that are set. That's a geocentric mindset, that you're looking at and you're appreciating that we have our differences, we have some similarities. What is the best way, the best approach in order to make sure we can get the job done? To make sure that we're being ethical and considerate, and that we're creating a great climate and environment for all of our stakeholders. That's a geocentric mindset. That's what you should strive for. So Alvin accepts that there's these differences and similarities, right? And that the company should use whatever techniques are most effective. If you were paying attention to what I said, then which of these four answers is describing Alvin? I just said it, right? It's C, geocentric. That is what you should strive for. So, oftentimes as a manager, especially for larger companies, you are often tasked to be a road warrior. You're going to have to travel a lot. And to be a star warrior, there are 3 different lessons that you need to master. That the first lesson is that frequent travel may be needed because personal encounters are essential. Even though we can still do our web conferencing, that shaking of the hands, that laying eyes on another person, the human touch element is still essential in business. The second lesson is that travel may be global, but you still have to have a local understanding. You may travel abroad, you may have locations all around the world, but you still must think local. You have to understand the local needs. The third lesson is that during your downtime in travel, it can be used to expand business contacts so that you can have greater reach, more exposure, and greater impact, both short-term and long-term. So why do companies expand internationally? Well, there's several reasons. One is the availability of supplies. If you need a certain kind of banana that is not grown here domestically, you can export it from another country. You can also set up a factory in that country, cut some of your middleman costs out, and be able to import back into your home country to provide and possibly even expand beyond your home country as far as your customer base. A second reason is new markets. It expands. It gives you greater reach. You have more customer access. It can lower your labor cost. You can have access to capital to finance your growth, to finance your overhead. You can avoid tariffs and import quotas. As I just mentioned in the first thing, if I set up location in another country, or if I have a business relationship, I can then be able to avoid the quotas of how much I can or cannot import. I can avoid some of those tariffs and taxes. So that is something that companies have to always take in consideration when they decide to expand. So here's some ways that you can go about expanding. The lowest risk and the least amount of investment is just outsourcing your work. A step towards the right, which gives you a little bit more risk and investment, is importing, exporting, and counter trading. Licensing and franchising has a little bit more risk and greater investment. Creating a joint venture with another organization gives you even more risk and investment. The greatest risk in investment is when you create a wholly owned subsidiary. And so you can see lowest to greatest. Starting off, that outsourcing can be very beneficial. You get to see how well you can do in a market without being fully committed, both with resources and money. So global outsourcing is also called offshoring. And that's when you're going to use a supplier outside of your home country in order to provide goods, services, or even labor. You have your import, export, and counter trade. And importing is when you buy goods from outside of your country and resell them within your country. When you export, you're producing a good within your country and you're going to sell them outside of your country. And counter trading is where you barter for goods. I'll give you this good for your good. So I'll give you this lawnmower for your whatever. So that's the counter trade where you barter. In 1999 and 2013, the top 10 exporting countries, as you can see, there were some shifts, right? There were some shifts, and in some places, some major shifts. So in 1999, the U.S. was ranked number 1. Germany was 2, Japan was 3, France was 4, Britain was 5, Canada was 6, Italy was 7, the Netherlands was 8, China was 9, Belgium was 10. Now, that was in 1999. Fast track to 2013. The U.S. dropped from number 1 in exporting to 3. China jumped from number 9 to number 1. Germany has stayed steady at number 2. Japan dropped one slot from 3 to 4. France dropped a slot from 4 to 5. Canada dropped below the top 10 altogether. South Korea, jumped in. So they went from below the top 10 to now they're at number 6. Canada just dropped out of the top 10 altogether. Italy dropped down from 7 to 8. Russia jumped back into the exporting race, right? They made it into the top 10 in 2013. And then Belgium. Belgium was on the top 10. They dropped below the top 10. And the UK was once below the top 10 in 99, and now they're right there at the base of the top 10 in 2013. What I'd love for you to do is to pull up the statistics for 2015 and 2016 and see where these countries rank in comparison to 99 and 2013. You'll be entertained to see. If the U.S. does not focus on producing more products to export, we will continue to fall down that ranking. Your goal as a country is to be able to export more products and import less. We've done a reverse, and if you see between those years, we have become a high importing country. We're producing less things, but we're buying more. And most of the things, oddly enough, that we're buying are from China, Germany, Japan. Very interesting. So check that out. Do some research online. It won't be difficult to find. So how do we go about expanding? We can also license and franchise I shared with you the other options. When you license, you're allowing another foreign company to pay you a fee, or where they can make or distribute your product or service. They're going to pay in order to make the product or service, or to make the product or to distribute the product or service. Franchising allows a foreign company to pay your company a fee, and they'll share in the profit in return for using your brand name in the package of your materials and services. So no different than if it's franchising a restaurant, Starbucks, a whatever. JVs, or joint ventures. This is where your company forms, and sometimes you create a separate entity, right? You start a new enterprise together with a foreign company. And in this new enterprise, both companies are going to share the risk and rewards. This can also be known as a strategic alliance. With a strategic alliance, however, sometimes the strategic alliance is, the joint venture can be short-term, the strategic alliance can be short-term. So those terms are interchanged, sometimes casually, so they have to be clearly defined as to, is this a strategic alliance where this is us keeping our separate entities, but we're still benefiting, or are we really coming and joining together and we're creating an entirely new enterprise based on this relationship, which then by creating this separate enterprise, it may not necessarily directly impact our individual separate companies. So if that venture falls apart, we don't necessarily, although there will have an impact, it can have an impact on your individual companies that you started off with. It will have less of an impact because it's a totally separate enterprise with its own budget, its own resources, and that's what a joint venture can provide. Your textbook can also share some examples. So when we look at a wholly owned subsidiary and a greenfield venture, a wholly owned subsidiary is where it's totally owned and controlled by an organization. It's foreign, created, owned, and controlled. A greenfield venture is a foreign subsidiary that the owning organization has built from scratch. So it's something that is created brand new by that new foreign subsidiary. So XYZ Corp builds a manufacturing plant in Mexico. They employ Mexican citizens. They get great tax treatments by the government in Mexico for it. Are they using a maquiladora, counter trading, outsourcing, or franchising? Now, I did not mention one of these earlier. Well, I did, but I did not specifically say the terminology. So this is a moderate question. Actually, it'd be difficult because it really wasn't addressed on the slide. So the answer is actually A. And this is where you take advantage of lower labor cost, and you're employing the local labor. And so with that, you'll receive favorable tax credit from that particular government. And so that is that process. So we talked about some of the barriers that you can experience when you're trading internationally. Taxes, right? You have tariffs, which are, it could be a tax, it could be duty for customs, anything that comes through customs, there is a tax involved. You're going to pay some kind of fee. And that's what happens when a product is brought is imported into your country, you bring it into your country, there's a tax on it. If any of you travel overseas, and there's usually when you're going through customs and they ask you, they want to know, did you purchase X products at X number of dollars? And you need to list the products that you purchase. Why? Because they're going to tax you for it. There's also import quotas. There's a limit on the number of products that can be imported. But remember, we spoke earlier that if you set up operations overseas, then guess what? You can actually possibly bypass those quotas. An embargo is where there's a complete ban on importing and exporting of certain products. And with that can negatively impact your organization because guess what? Your product cannot be imported into the U.S. or exported from the U.S. And this embargo can be multiple countries. There are some countries that will form an alliance to create an embargo to ban the import and export of a product. And the import quotas are designed to prevent dumping. And what this is that this is where you have a foreign company that exports products abroad at a lower price than the price that they would normally pay in their home market. Sometimes it can even be below the cost of production. And they do that to drive down the price of the domestic product. And so by creating that quota, it helps to prevent the dumping. Because once again, that is not looking at all of the stakeholders, right? When you're driving down driving that price down so much, you're only concerned about really one stakeholder, right? But not everyone. So that's what that does, is to help create that process. You have WTO, and they are an organization that helps promote international trade, the World Trade Organization, and they help to monitor and enforce the trade agreements amongst countries. And those agreements are based on GATT, which are the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and it consists of 159 countries. Some may get kicked out, right? But it helps to make sure that those agreements are monitored properly and that they are enforced. We have two entities that come under fire a lot, which is the World Bank and IMF. The World Bank is responsible for providing low-interest loans to various developing nations to help improve with their transportation needs, education, health, and telecommunication needs. And the IMF, which is the International Money Fund, they are created to assist with helping with the flow of money between nations. So making sure that there aren't any hiccups or clogs in that funnel. And they come under attack because you have some people that scrutinize and question whether or not they're doing all that they can do, and if they're having the kind of impact that they claim they do. So do further research on both of these entities, as well as the WTO. They come under attack as well. So we look at trading blocs, and trading blocs are groups of nations within a geographic region that have agreed to remove barriers to trade with each other. This is also what you call an economic community. And with that, you can see it's interesting during the 2016 election time, so from 2014 to 2016, there was so much dialogue about trade in our borders, and we're talking about Mexico and Canada. And what's interesting is that we have a trading bloc with Canada and Mexico. That's called NAFTA. It's the North American, right? North American. U.S. is not North America. North America consists of the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And we have a trade agreement with those other two nations. And with that, we can import their products and services, and they can import our products and services. And we created this. I mean, we have shared borders with them. So it makes that trade so much easier. We then have a European Union, the EU, and that's where Europe has 28 trading partners, 28 countries that they trade amongst, and they were actually forcing some out of their EU, which was causing so much havoc over the past 3 to 5 years. Then you have APEC, which is covering the Pacific Rim, and that's a cluster of 21 countries. ASEAN covers the Asian countries. There's 10 countries specifically in Asia. And then you have a trading bloc in Latin America, which is the Mercosur. And Sur means south in Spanish. And then we have our Central American bloc, CAFTA. And you see how, so we have these clusters, 6 major clusters that allow us to have free trade amongst those clusters with no barriers. With all of the rhetoric during the 2016 elections, it really would have negatively impacted our trade with Mexico. A lot of people don't realize how much we benefit from trade in Mexico because of this agreement. By trying to disassemble NAFTA, it would ultimately mean that we'd have to also, you can't then say split it up and then you don't have the relationship with Canada. We wouldn't have that relationship either, which would leave us solely alone, which means, guess what? No import, export to our 2 closest neighbors. That's huge. That's also thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs that we would lose. Because people oftentimes assume that with that trade that, oh, we're solely providing jobs or hiring labor in those foreign countries, but it's not just the case. Oftentimes, the case is that we're employing local employees, U.S. citizens, in order to make sure that we're able to provide products and services to our trade partners. So it is a win-win situation. But the reason why you have people that fight some of these trading blocs is because they have special interest groups and they have large corporations who are trying to avoid, remember what I mentioned earlier, if you're trying to avoid versus certain taxes and various restrictions that are placed upon you, and if those trade agreements outline that these specific details, then it keeps you from being as free and flexible as you want to be, which oftentimes that free and flexibility approach can lead to some unethical business practices. And so there's always an underlying reason why people start fighting these trading blocs. But they play on the ignorance of the common voter who does not do enough detailed research and use critical thinking to figure out why. Why would you not want us to have an alliance with our neighbors? Why? So just remember that. Do further research on that. So at some point, we had a very tumultuous relationship with Cuba. And because of that, we did not allow the import of sugar and cigars from Cuba. Is this an example of an embargo, a tariff, a quota, or a maquiladora? If you said A, you are correct. So, our most favorite nation trading status describes a condition where your country grants other countries favorable trading treatment, such as the reduction of import duties. And this is a good faith gesture. It helps strengthen the alliance between the countries, creates economic growth, provides more jobs. It just brings about greater harmony. And when we look at culture, and we talked about it earlier, it's your shared beliefs and values and knowledge and the different patterns that you follow. And it's amongst a group, right? And so when you look at national culture, there are certain things that are just American, right? There's certain things that we just believe, that we value, that certain knowledge that we possess, certain patterns of behavior that we follow, that is American, and and it's just all that makes us who we are as Americans. The same is true in Germany, in Spain, in Japan, in Jamaica, in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Brazil. Every country has a national culture. And so you have to understand the cultural similarities and differences, appreciate them, and find a way to complement them, especially when you're doing business with or in those countries. So we look at the Globe Project, and that helps us look at the different dimensions of culture. And we have a low and a high context culture. The low context is looking at shared meanings that are primarily derived from the words that are written and spoken. Under high context, you're looking at various situational cues and looking for the meanings when a message is communicated between other people. We have some dimensions of power, distance, uncertainty, avoidance, and institutional collectivism. Under power distance, it's how much unequal distribution of power should there be within an organization and within society. The further you are away from power, guess what? The less impact you have. So when you think about, I'm going to give you a visual. You visualize the President of the United States. And in a picture, you see the President and a group of people. Those who stand closest to the President in the Oval Office, for example, are the ones that have the greatest power. You'll usually see the VP, the Secretary of State, Secretary. You start to see. Pay close attention when you look. His closest advisors, so on and so forth. It's the same thing. When you see pictures with the president, any president of the U.S., and for most countries in general, and you see pictures and they're all at a table and they're having whatever conversation, whatever the meeting is, whoever is sitting closest to the president has more power. The farther you are away from the president, the least amount of power you have. And that's just within that example. But power distance applies to within organizations. Whoever's closest to the CEO of an organization has more power. The farther you are down the totem pole, the least amount of power you technically have. See the difference? Uncertainty avoidance. How much should people rely on social norms and rules to avoid uncertainty in the decisions that you have to make in the different scenarios that are presented? Under institutional collectivism, it's how much should leaders encourage and reward loyalty to the social unit? And that could be within the organization, and that's any kind of entity. Then we look at in-group collectivism, gender egalitarianism, and assertiveness. I know these are some lofty $30 words, right? So under in-group collectivism, it's how much pride and loyalty should people have for their family or organization. How much is enough? How much is too much? How much is not enough? You look at that, and you have people in the organization who seem like they're just die-hard fans of it. They wear the shirts, and they're always representing. They got their coffee cups. They've got the stickers on their car. They are proud to be part of that organization. And you have the family. If someone is like, yes, I'm a foreman. Yeah, what it's how much. It's looking at all those dimensions of that, the layers of that. Then you look below, and how much should society maximize gender role differences? And that's the egalitarianism of gender, and looking at society's influence and in the differences of gender roles. Assertiveness is how confrontational and dominant should you be in a social relationship, whether that is a social business relationship, boyfriend, dating, girlfriend, kind of like, ooh, how far, how deep should it go? And then we look at future orientation and performance orientation and humane orientation. And under future, you're looking at the ability for people to delay gratification by being able to plan and save for the future. Under performances, how much should you be rewarded for improving and excelling in a job and in a project and on a task? And under humane orientation is how you can encourage and reward people for being kind and fair and friendly and generous to others. Then we look at our other cultural variations of language, our interpersonal space, how we communicate, time orientation such as monochronic and polychronic. Monochronic is our preference for doing one thing at a time, and polychronic is how we can do more than one thing at a time, right? So we start talking about our multitasking. And we look at our religion as a variation of culture, and law and political stability. So why do managers fail on foreign assignments when they go overseas? Why do U.S. managers fail? Usually when we look at it, when you hear about someone being an expat or an expatriate, is that you live or work in a foreign country, and usually 10 to 20% of all managers that are sent abroad come home because of job dissatisfaction, or they have difficulty adjusting, and usually you're having difficulty adjusting to the cultural norms and the different values and belief system and things of that nature. So you go to a country and the food is totally different than what you're accustomed to. The norms are totally different. If you go to a country where women are publicly less valued across the board than in your home country, that can speak volumes. If you're used to being a very vocal and present and visible leader within your company and within your community, and you go to a country where women are to be seen and not heard, and women are to be seen when they're told to be seen, you may have a difficult time leading in that country. Doesn't matter what the home office in your home country thinks and says about you. Is you're dealing with different beliefs, norms, values. So a lot of times when someone's coming back, they're just dissatisfied. Things are not the same. It doesn't feel like home. It's no different than when you were a child and you were sent to go stay over an aunt's house or grandma's house. It didn't feel like home. And so you get homesick and you're ready to go back home. You want to be in your bed. You want to experience your things. You want to, it feels like the air even smells and feels better at home. And so this happens a lot. You can read further about this in chapter 4 to see how it can be addressed. And a lot of times it really is important to expose your employees, especially anyone that you're prepping for that transition. Expose them to some of the cultural differences and similarities in advance. Situations where that's very difficult would be in the military, especially if all of a sudden it's a quick deployment. You just found out about it, and it's like you're going to be out in 48 hours or something. Like you're like, what? But I think that the armed forces could do a great job of exposing through various training, um, soon after or even during boot camp, or basic training, and is just showing some of the different nuances and to help overcome various stereotypes, to address these things and saying we're not, you may never go to some of these countries, but you may, and we want to be able to expose you to some of the things that, if eating escargot, which is snails, is the norm, or eating the, if the if you're a gluten-free fanatic, well, guess what? You may not do well in certain countries that the primary dishes are filled with gluten. Um, if you're a vegetarian and you happen to go into a country that is a big meat and potato kind of place, and you can get the potatoes, but goodness gracious, you won't find much anywhere else. But it's all those different things. It's, if going, dealing with being of one religious background and going into a country that is of a totally different religious background, where that religion is the primary religion, can be very, very, very difficult. So there's so many different things to consider and to address as a manager, as a business owner, as an employee in doing foreign work assignments. So with that, that is the end of this presentation on Chapter 4. If you have any questions, if there's anything that you come across in the book that you need further clarification on, you know how to reach me. Thank you, everyone.